Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unlocked, where we talk about unlocking the potential of you, the people you work with, and the people you do life with. At the time of this recording, I'm offering all of you, yes, my lovely listeners, a free 15-minute communication coaching call. You come with some kind of communication problem, and I give you a solution. My calendar link is in the show notes, so check that out. You have come to the right place if you want to learn a little bit about trust and the problem that we're having with it inside of our organizations and us as leaders. Today, I'm speaking to Ron Carucci, and he has been working with leaders and organizations for over 30 years, from startups to Fortune 10s, nonprofits, head of states, turnarounds and new markets and strategies, doing all types of things, overhauling leadership, redesigning for growth. And all of it is at the center of this idea of trust and telling the truth. And we're going to get into 4 different criteria of things that that companies are having a hard time doing, leaders are having a hard time doing, but also how you can use those things to shape your direction as you grow. He's worked with more than 25 countries and 4 continents. He's the author of 9 books. He's actually just written 10 now, and he is a popular contributor to Harvard Business Review, where Navalent, the company that he is the managing partner of, was named one of 2016's management ideas that mattered most. He's contributed to Forbes. He's a 3 times TEDx speaker. He's talked about the topic of power, which has been reviewed more than 1.3 million times. So you can check out that video on YouTube. And he's been on Fortune, CEO Magazine, Business Insider, MSNBC, Business Week, Fast Company, Smart Business, and Thought Leaders. The dude knows what he's talking about, and you are going to get a little taste of that right now. So here we go. Ron, it is a gift to have you, man. Thanks for being here.
Well, Scott, thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
There is something very important that you talk about, and I kind of stack it into this realm of 5 different criteria that I usually talk about with leaders and organizations. And the first one is foundation of like self-awareness and relationship and communication. But the second part of that is the trust and relationships part. Um, tell me why you're putting such a focus on this.
Well, Scott, I think for such a time as this, trust is in a free fall. Today, you don't have to look around too far to find reasons why people are withholding trust from each other because of a world that has been trained to polarize and with an impulse to reject and refute. You don't have to look far to find leaders who are role modeling great untrustworthy behavior for us. They're making headlines every day. And people are sad and frustrated and angry about the fact that they don't know where to put their trust. The trust research by the year continues to put out our institutional trust is in a free fall. Certainly government and media trust is gone. Our private sector organizations are the last great hope of places where people can put their trust in their organizations and their bosses. But today, leaders start distrusted. They start. If used to be if you were a leader, you were trusted because you were a leader. Today, you can go from being a trusted peer to instantly being an untrusted leader the moment you get promoted, just because you're a leader. And so now people expect you to screw them or use them or exploit them or disappoint them. And so I wanted to understand, could you predict the conditions under which people would tell the truth and behave fairly and serve a greater good? And could you predict the conditions under which people would lie, cheat, and serve their own interests first? And if you could predict it, could you shape the behavior of individuals and organizations in a way that allowed for the kinds of experiences that allow people to thrive, that allow people to bring their best selves to work, that allow people to reach the limits of what they came to the world to accomplish? And so we set out on a 15-year longitudinal study, interviewed 3,200 leaders, to understand what could we learn. And indeed, we learned a lot. far more than I would have expected about the conditions that create trustworthy environments and the conditions that don't. Mm.
Let's like pour salt in the wound. Okay. I want to like dig into the problem here a little bit because I've heard this whole mantra like, if we talk generationally, and you can maybe speak to some of this if you have experienced this, or maybe some of your research says that before it was you start with an A plus and then you have to earn an F with me. Like as far as leadership, I come into a new job, I meet my boss, they immediately, because of positional power and who they are in the world, older generations think you're who you are, you've gotten to where you are based on this, you must be something. So you start with an A with me and then you have to earn it. Generations today seem to say you're going to start with like a C or a D with me. Like I'm just going to assume you're not really for me and I'm going to be speculative of you a bit and you have to earn an A with me.
Mm.
What do you think about that?
I think that is the truth about what happens today, Scott. I don't know that it's generational. I think I see lots of folks in our peer sets entering jobs, reporting to leaders half their age, and feeling the same way. And so I do think that today leadership has done a great job at earning the distrust of others by its continued failure, by its arrogance, by its self-interest, by its complete lack of preparation. I mean, I just did a piece in Fast Company with my dear friend Tomas Chamar Music, brilliant mind. And we found one study that 83% of leaders, when they enter management jobs, have no formal training of any kind. So we're throwing people to the wolves. My research from 10 years ago for Rising to Power, we learned that 50% of leaders, or some studies suggest 60% of leaders, when they enter a higher altitude role, so when they ascend from middle management to their first vice president job, or when they director or senior director, whatever the upper part of an organization in their world would be, more than 50 to 60% of them fail in the first 18 months. We've known that statistic for more than 20 years. So, it's a great annuity for recruiters, but why are we gambling with people's careers? So we have known for a long time leaders are ill prepared to do what we're asking them to do. Now, in a post-pandemic world where everybody's expectations have dramatically shifted about why they go to work, what they get from work, and what they want from a boss. So now used to be that modern leadership, I really hate that term, things like authenticity and compassion and curiosity and empathy were like these fringe characteristics that if you got them on top of somebody's command and control, pompous, self-serving, self, that was a great thing. Today, they barely qualify as table stakes. If you haven't got a modicum of those to show up with, you're going to start with that C minus, and you're never going to get past it. So the rules of the game have changed, and so few leaders are prepared to play by the new rules. They weren't even prepared to play by the old rules. So we're doing a really poor job of helping people understand when we put this set of people, 5 people, 5,000 people, 50,000 people in your charge, and you don't leave them better than you found them, and they don't leave you better than they found you. It didn't work.
So what is all this coming from? Is it the lack of preparation, or is it the individual themselves? Like, do we have who's to blame here for this thing? I mean, when we talk about this, who do we point the finger at? If we're going to point fingers, is it people today just and their ability of self-preservation, this whole thing, or is it the lack of training, or is it both?
There's a lot of factors, Scott. I think organizations, are organizing human endeavor at scale, which is the thing I love most in the world, right? We've never been good at it. I mean, you can go back 150 years. We've never been actually good at what it takes to organize human endeavor at scale. Today, you have the onslaught of technological, disruptions. Who knows what AI will do or not do? But the speed at which we gather information, the speed at which our brains are not processing the information that's coming at us, our, we live in a public square all the time. You are in a fishbowl on a jumbotron 24/7. Somebody is out to make you the next scathing video on LinkedIn. And so we are constantly in postures of protection and self-defense. We're constantly on guard. We're constantly hypervigilant uh, about self-scrutinizing our own choices because we expect the rest of the world to do it too. So to get somebody to show up in a way that's genuine, in a way that's caring, in a way that is principle based, rooted in a set of values that people want to follow. It's just a higher bar today. The good news is people are doing it. People are out there. Organizations and leaders are out there, many of them, who are showing up in ways that make people inspired and want to follow. That allow people to push the limits of their own convention and their own question their own self-limiting beliefs. There's just not enough of them to to uh, to offset what the rest of the world is doing, which is polarizing, fragmenting, and hating. Mm.
Tell me about the role of politics and the, I guess, the ability for leaders to do what they need to do. How does politics play a role in this whole world?
Well, gosh, that's like a 5-part series.
Okay, this is part one. Here we go. Part one.
It's entering the workplace whether we like it or not. And I think it's playing too much of a role. I think you had this backlash swing in the pandemic of organizations and CEOs should be speaking out against social issues. Then you had a backlash of entitlement from workers who expected their companies to speak out. The problem is when leaders did it, you pissed off half of your workplace and got yourself into trouble and got yourself painted into a corner of commitments you never could have kept. So whether or not politics, the role of politics inside corporations is tricky, and we've not figured it out. You ignore it at your own peril. You overindulge it at your own peril. And so my advice to leaders is always, Allison Taylor's new book, Higher Ground, great example. She really is brilliant about this, says, speak on the issues that matter to your shareholders and your stakeholders. Speak to the issues that your company can actually impact. Engage in commentary that you have expertise in and ignore the rest. But you have, sitting around a CEO, you have a comms director, a chief counsel, an HR person, external advisors, consultants, your executive coach, your therapist, your spouse, trying to leverage your platform, trying to leverage your power for some other gain or some other message. And executives who succumb to that, who don't step back and ask themselves, do you understand that you have a megaphone strapped to your mouth 24/7? Everything you do and say is amplified. You're on the jumbotron. Everything you do is a cue. You can't walk down the hall at a certain pace without somebody attaching meaning to it. And that's a requirement of executive leadership today. And if you don't know how to manage that, and you're allowing way too many voices into the mix to shape your choices, you're just setting yourself up for a real painful moment.
Okay, I can see this. When you were doing your research, though, I want to dig into that a little bit and understand what was the thing that you found that undermines trust the most when it comes to leadership.
Well, there were 4.
Okay, let's do all 4.
The first one was be who you say you are. So when your actions and words, this is both as an organization and as a leader, when your actions and words don't match, you are 3 times more likely to have people lie and cheat and serve their own interest first. When is no say-do gap, and there's a one-to-one ratio between who you say you are and what you actually do, you've reduced duplicity. In the former case, you've actually institutionalized duplicity. You've said to people, it's okay around here to say one thing and do another. But when there is alignment, you're 3 times more likely to have people tell the truth and behave fairly and serve a greater good. Transparency. When people walk into rooms, often referred to as meetings, and what's happening in that room is an honest exchange of ideas. People are willing to say what they think. There's no preconceived agenda of what the outcome of the meeting needs to be. You're 3.5 times more likely to have people be honest and tell the truth. But if you walk into that room and it's nothing but orchestrated theater, the decision was made yesterday, and this is the theater now to make you feel like you were part of it. The last thing anybody wants to hear is a voice dissenting from the prevailing point of view in the room. Now you're 3.5 times more likely to have people lie and cheat because they have to go underground to find the truth. Accountability and dignity. If the way my work is talked about and measured makes me feel like I'm being dignified, like my work is being honored, like my well-being is important to you as an organization and as my boss, you're 4 times more likely to have people be honest, because now I can show up and contribute and trust that my contribution will be honored with dignity. But if I show up and I feel like a cog in your wheel, I feel like a number in a box, you don't really know what I did to contribute. You don't have any idea what it took for me. You provided me poor guidance and minimal expectations, and I had to guess my way through it. Now you're holding me accountable to rules you never told me existed. Now you're 4.5 times more likely to have me lie and cheat, because now I have to embellish my accomplishments and hide my mistakes from you. And lastly, cross-functional relationships or differences, right? If your organization is made up of we's and they's, if your tolerance of those who are not like you is minimal, if you're prone to exploit others for your own good, so the classics, sales and marketing, supply chain and operations, sales and marketing, HR and everybody, then this was probably the most surprising one, you're 6 times more likely to have people be dishonest, because when you fragment the organization, you fragment the truth. And when we have dueling truths, now my goal isn't to find a single source of truth anymore. Now my goal is to prove you wrong and me right. But if those seams are stitched well, if you have more we's than they's, if you're able to embrace the points of view of others that are different, if you're able to actually engage proactively dissenting information and disconfirming ideas, now you're 6 times more likely to have people tell the truth and behave fairly, because now 1 + 1 = 3. Now we're looking for the bigger story that we're both part of. The interesting thing about the statistical models, Scott, is that they're cumulative. So if you're good at all 4 of those things, you're now 16 times more likely to have people trust you, behave fairly, and behave honestly. But if you suck at all 4 of those things, you are now 16 times more likely to put yourself on a headline of a newspaper story you never wanted to be in. You will make your worst nightmare come true. And those are all conditions that are hiding in plain sight in organizations.
Which one's the hardest, you think, for leaders? And your experience, when you're working with organizations all over the place, is there one that, some of the other ones are like, yeah, okay, like we can work on that one, but when it comes down to one, it's like, that's a heavy rock.
They all have quick failure points. They all have levels of difficulty and require levels of skill that are just different. And they all have systemic realities and individual realities, right? So even if you're good at them individually, but the system you're part of isn't, you're going to be in a lot of stress. If the system happens to be good at one of them and you're not, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. What we typically see is when the system sucks at it and you suck at it, you blend right in. And so improving isn't really you don't feel the need to improve. And so those are slower failures because you and the system are colluding in your own failures. I think the last one, because of the force multiplier, right, 6 times relatively, it's harder because as a leader you have to have breadth. You have to see, if you grew up in a silo in finance, you become CEO. You grew up in marketing or in operations and become CEO. you're still going to have all the biases from your functional days or your regional days. And so your job as you get to the top 2 levels of an organization is to no longer see functions, but to see capabilities. So you can't see product development, marketing, and customer analytics. You have to see innovation. You can't see logistics, supply chain, and customer service. You have to see customer orientation, customer centricity, and make those seams and those boundaries blur. But if you don't do that, you are fragmenting the organization. You're perpetuating the problem, which makes you competitively weaker, which makes your customers angrier. So, that one, because of the impact it can have on trust or distrust, I would say is one I get asked for a lot of help on. We're so vertically oriented, all our work's horizontal. We just can't collaborate cross-functionally. I did a whole course on LinkedIn on it, and within the first month, it had thousands of participants because people are asking for help with how do I coordinate with them, or, oh my gosh, what do they want now? Rather than you're on the same team. And whatever competitive distinction gets created at your intersection, neither of you could do alone. So if 1 + 1 is only equaling, 1.3 and not 1 + 1 equaling 5, you're both the problem. And what's so fascinating, Scott, was when I bring folks together to actually stitch those seams, inevitably, about an hour into the conversation, we start to hear things like, oh, that's what you do? Or, oh, no wonder I drive you crazy. I didn't know that you needed it for that reason. Or, that's where that data gets used? You just continue to find these, you would have thought were fundamental discoveries of how you work together. Clueless about what the people in the adjacent space do, or why they do it, or why they're asking from you what they need, or why they're not able to deliver to you what you ask of them. And you've just done this, just scarecrow arms. Rather than having a simple conversation around, hey, Scott, this doesn't feel right. We can do better. Let's talk. That's just, for some reason, a natural act for leaders in organizations.
Because what that does is that then builds alignment, which I believe is hindered a lot by our inability to trust one another. If I don't feel you're for me, if I just feel you're for yourself, I'm going to have a lot of issues getting on board with whatever you're trying to do. And I'm going to be a little hesitant, right, to jump on that train. So my alignment, the alignment of an organization, of a team, of whatever, is going to be really impacted, which then impacts our ability to execute well. If we're not aligned, we're going to have a hard time executing. And then everybody's just going to complain that we don't have enough time, money, and people. Right. Because,
it's funny, whenever I actually follow the trail of contempt, when someone says, I don't trust them, they're only out for themselves, or they don't care about what we do, that they don't care about the customers. And there's some attribution there. And I'll ask, what data, what evidence do you have that that's the truth? More than 70% of the time, it's a made-up story. It's actually not what's happening at all. They never bothered to go interrogate their own evidence. And so that confirmation bias kicked in. Their own trauma is being projected. And so their expectation of somebody's distrust, they don't realize the degree to which they're actually helping create. That they're behaving like a jerk, and so when the person is cold in return, they're like, see? And so typically, when I unwind those dynamics, people discover that the narratives they had created to shape their conclusion were so faulty and absent of any helpful evidence that they actually helped create the very problem they've been complaining about.
You say, so the part of your book, the title is, to be honest. And then it says, lead with the power of truth, justice, and purpose. So truth is a big component to all this, and trust, and how are we feeling safe to tell the truth and do those things? Tell me about the justice and the purpose part of this. That caught me off guard.
So what we found both in the neuroscience and how our brains process cues from others and how we determine trustworthiness, and in our organizational systems, the 4 things I told you about before, telling the truth wasn't enough to get you labeled as honest. You might get labeled as reliable. You might get labeled as consistent. But truth, justice, and purpose means saying the right thing, doing the right thing, fair, making it fair, and saying and doing the right thing for the right reason. You have to do all three to get labeled as honest. The bar's gone up precisely because our experience of honesty in all those forms has gone into a free fall. And so now people's expectations are just that much higher. So you have to do things in the service of meeting people care about. You have to make it fair and equitable. Everybody has to be able to show up in your organization with an equal chance of success, and everybody has to know it. And you have to not just tell the truth, but you have to live the truth. You have to be, if you say you're these things as an organization, you have to be them. They just can't be cosmetic words consumed on a wall or on a screensaver. You actually have to embody them. For many people, for many organizations, the construction of that language is the end of the journey versus companies that actually live them. That's the beginning of the journey to then shape the entire environment around those words to make sure that they're inconsistent. But how many companies tout diversity or inclusion and respect as a value, and you look at the HR systems and the information systems and the hiring systems and the governance processes and the budget processes, and you see how much exclusion is built into those systems, how underrepresented groups continue to feel marginalized, how microaggressions are rewarded, how the way in which decisions get made don't include many factors of those they claim to respect. Nobody's interrogating the systemic factors that would actually tell you whether or not those words are true or not. They're just saying, well, we said them and we meant them when we said them, so that should be enough.
Well, that goes back to the be who you say you're going to be, right? And who you say you are. And we saw a huge manifestation of this, I feel, right during the pandemic and during the racial injustice stuff with the George Floyd episodes and things coming out, and companies actually being called out on a lot of this was happening. It's like, hold on, you said you were this kind of company, but now since COVID happened, you're treating me this way. Or you say we're that kind of company, but now all this racial stuff is happening and now you're doing this. And wait, we weren't doing that before. And now all of a sudden it
Well,
was just kind of
I
this
think Scott,
bouncing
what actually
around.
happened after George Floyd wasn't companies who were doing different things; they were saying different things. But there was a 2023 data set that was released that said, I think 80% of the companies that made promises for racial equity after George Floyd didn't keep them.
Hmm.
A slew of chief diversity officers were hired in 2021, and that same slew of chief diversity officers were removed in 2023. So it was a short-lived commitment, and now you have all the DEI backlash, which is beyond ridiculous, and it's unfortunate, But let's be honest here: people who look like you and I played a disproportionate role in unleveling the playing field, and people who look like you and I need to be the ones that actually play a disproportionate role in releveling it.
I agree, 100%. And sometimes, and not to get off on that on that wagon, 'cause I'm sure we could have a whole conversation about it. But it's we need to have a seat at the table. The people that look like you and I, because we are, we have a voice as well. And we should use
Yep.
it to help perpetuate the goodness of who humanity can be and should be. So I feel like
I'll put
they're
a link for any of your listeners who care about that. I'll put a link in your chat. I recently did an article in Newsweek, me and a black scholar woman together, about white men need to be in the conversation. And I work with a group called White Men for Racial Justice, and we're about 4 years old now. There's about 400 men that meet every week to talk about really hard things. And what we've learned, as we've sort of figured out our own theory of change, is when white men learn how to belong, they learn how to include. But you and I were racially and socially and genderly conditioned to not belong. We were conditioned to control the belonging of others, but not be an equal. We were trained to not be vulnerable, to not know the answers, to not look confident, to be in control. And so there's a massive amount of white men today. Look at the mental health crisis, right? White men over 50 suicide rates are out of control because we've never been taught to belong. And now, because we're just told we're the problem or part of the problem, we don't feel included. And so we feel stuck. And when white men have a place to have these conversations and to belong, and we experience belonging, we realize what it is we've deprived others of. And it makes us that much more inclined to want to be in the conversation and help shape change that's needed.
That's powerful, man. I had no idea that even existed. Send me some information
I
on that,
will. I will.
please.
I'll take
I,
a
I
look at the
want.
article.
I'm interested. The idea of trust plays a huge role in all the things we're talking about. What is the what is the thing like? So you can say these things: be who you say you are, transparency, accountability, and dignity, differences and tolerance of those things, and who we are and where we are in the organization. What do we do about it? I mean, it's like just tell the truth, you know, like just be who you say you're going to be and just respect the differences. And I mean, but it's not that easy.
It's
I mean,
not.
what do we do?
Because these are when there's systemic issues, you have to design for solutions. You can't decree a solution, and so leaders who want to look under the hood and actually assess their organization to understand where are and pick one. Right. The great news about the statistical models is that they weren't all or nothing. Right. So, for example, if you improve, I might get these numbers wrong. Somebody might call me on my own data, but if you improved your say-do gaps by, say, 35%, you're going to get a 15% hit in honesty, right? So you can do incremental improvements on all these. You don't have to go from none to all. And so pick one. Just pick where you know there are pain points. Pick where you know your organization is not performing the way you'd want it to, and dig in. You're gonna find stuff, right? If you if the transparency one, here's a simple test. If you don't have somebody coming into your office once or twice a week saying something to you that makes you uncomfortable, you can be very confident your leadership sucks because they're telling somebody. And if you only have a team of 5 people, and you think, well, there wasn't anything to tell me, then now you're stupid because even in a team of 5 people, something could have gone awry that week that you would have needed to know about. So your question you should wonder about is, if they're not coming to me, why is that? Just be curious and go find out. Every night at the dinner tables of people in your organization, stories about you are being told. It's just a fact. If you don't know what stories they're telling, you should want to get in on the conversation, because you should want to make sure that every day, the way you show up to those you lead, you give them reasons to go home and tell stories that are inspired. Because then they'll come back the next day and give you the performance and the contribution and the energy that you need from them.
And I preach this all day. This is what I talk about as far as a leadership brand. I come from the world of brand strategy and design in my past life, and have incorporated that now into cultures. And doing what I'm doing is how are people talking about you when you're not around? And whether it's a product or a service that you offer, but yet the product or service may be you. And what are people saying about you at the barbecue? Are they saying, my boss is a complete wreck. You know, this happened, that happened. And then that's your reputation and that is your brand as you walk around. And how intentional are we about shaping that? I don't know. It seems like we put a lot of intention and focus on our external image for companies of products and services and marketing and sales. And, you know, sometimes some companies don't put a lot of emphasis on the internal
Well,
brand
except
or
that
their
we'll
own
all
leadership
say
brand.
people are our greatest asset. I was on a website this morning. We believe in people, product, and profit in that order. Okay. If I went around and asked people if their experience matched those words, what would they tell me? What would I hear? Your people come to work every day with 2 questions on their mind. Do I matter? And do I belong? That's it. That's the only 2 things that they're looking to satisfy as humans. The rest is gravy. Your job is to make sure that they never wonder, ever, whether the answer to either of those questions is an unqualified yes. Because any time they spend wondering about the answer to either of those questions, what you're getting is the performative version. You're getting looking like I matter and looking like I belong. And we all know what that looks like. And it's not pretty. And so if you have people around you who are self-promoting and performing their mattering, or withdrawing, or putting on a front to perform their belonging, that's a signal to you. That's data. Behavior is biography. And so they're telling you who they are, and they're telling you who they don't feel like they can be. If you ignore those signals, you do so at the peril of, and here's how you'll know: when there's a crisis, when there's a major setback, an unforeseen obstacle, you'll know what ignoring those signals will cost you.
And it costs a lot. And sometimes it's not in the moment. It's, a little bit down the road when you're like, it's probably because of, back then, that thing, that time.
Yeah, the dots will suddenly organize and connect for you in ways you won't find pleasant.
And it's the series. It's the tiny little micro moments over time that are going to dig that. It's usually not the grandiose ones. It's those can impact us over, for sure. But it's those little tiny millions of little micro moments that we have with people that, put little deposits in our brand account or withdrawals as we go throughout time. So paying attention to that is important. Ron, this is good, man. Where do people find your book? I'm sure they could just go to this one place called Amazon, but is there other places they can find it? Is there other help they can get from you? What do they do?
The first place you can go if you want to learn more about the book is www.tobehonest.net. One of the greatest things that was fun about this book, the intention wasn't for it to be a book. It was an article and research. And then people would ask things like, can you screen the college admission scandal 3 or 4 findings? Or can you screen the Theranos story 3 or 4 findings, which is about as fun as a proctology exam, and uninspiring. And I thought, oh my gosh, could we have found 4 things that nobody's doing? That would be like the worst ever. So then we thought, we need to go check and see, are these things people can actually produce? Are these conditions people are actually modeling so we can point to examples? And they came out of the woodwork. Oh my gosh, the world is teeming with organizations and leaders embodying these things. And so that was a book worth writing. It's a book of heroes. And so we video interviewed many of the interviews with some of the great leaders, Hubert Joly and Vincent Stanley from Patagonia and Rob Bilott, these brilliant people who have embodied these things across the life. So there's a 15-episode TV series called Moments of Truth, and you can binge watch all 15 episodes at the website, where you can also find articles about the book and the book itself. If you want to learn more about my work at Navalent and how we help organizations get better, you can come to Navalent, Navalent.com. And also, please come follow me on LinkedIn and hang out and check out my work.
You do have some rocking stuff on LinkedIn, so I can attest to that, and I hope people will connect with you there. You've made a big impact on a lot of people in different ways, and I know that that's part of your goal, what gives you fulfillment, as it does me. So thanks for being here. Thanks for being on the show, man. I hope you continue to spread the impact and do the things you're doing.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
83% of leaders have no formal education. I don't think anybody is surprised by this. I tend to say, by a raise of hands, when I'm doing my speaking gigs or workshops or anything, it's like, hey, by a raise of hands, who got a degree in leadership? And it's going to be pretty rare that you're ever going to see a hand raised, because it just doesn't happen. We learn leadership from the people who led us. And if they were unhealthy, then we probably are going to learn some unhealthy habits as well. And that is how it works. 50 to 60% of leaders, they fail in their first 18 months. That's a problem. We're setting ourselves up for failure. We're setting our organizations and our people up for failure. And that is a problem. The 4 elements that he talked about with trust: be who you say you are, be transparent, be accountable, and dignify the people's work, and make sure that they get some recognition. Differences, make sure we respect the differences and not create the silos and the who and the why are you doing this to me and what did you just say and all this other stuff that really creates the silos and turf wars inside organizations that reduces trust and productivity in the long run. Saying the right thing, doing the right thing, and saying and doing the right thing for the right reason. Ultimately, that's where it comes down to. And finally, I love his assessment here about, think about, have people recently said things to you that make you uncomfortable? I don't know. If they haven't, you're probably not creating a culture of psychological safety, which, builds down to this idea of trust. If you're not getting those conversations out in the open, you're not getting the best from your people, and you're not getting the best for the organization that you're running. So thank you, Ron, for being here. I really appreciate it. And I hope you keep doing the work you're doing. If you want to find out more information about me or check out the show notes where there's going to be more information and links to the things referenced in this episode, visit skotwaldron.com. And lastly, I'm asking for a little bit of love, just a little bit. So please take a moment, follow, rate the show. The algorithms like that. It helps me get the word out. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And until next time, stay unlocked.